belonged to his hospital. So he had been kind of laid off. So that type of thing, but that's not our usual member. So we started with an automated marketing platform, HubSpot, last year, and it's just been really kind of growing a lot since then, and getting things out more efficiently, more effectively, targeted. So all that's been helping. We've been working a lot in the last couple of years. So the membership's been going up, which is great. And now it's still higher. We're still like 3 or 4% higher than where we were last year. But we were on, starting in February, we thought we were going to be about 5 or 6% higher. So yeah, I won't complain. Just like sometimes work drives me crazy, but I'm like, well, I have a job, so I'm not going to complain.
Yeah, it's always good to be employed. Everything's kind of got its challenges, right? But when we're going through times like now, it's nice to have something that you can count on.
Right. So we haven't again had a special campaign, just more targeted. We just did all the persona work and all that stuff a year and a half ago, and are having more targeted emails and workflows and automated stuff. So that's nice.
How are you finding HubSpot to work with? Because I know it's a pretty robust system, and it can do the world. And I think that for some people, if you don't have that technical background, it can be a little overwhelming. So how are you finding that to work with?
And it's actually my deputy director who's working with it primarily, but I've kind of gotten pulled into it a lot. And so she's the one, and a former staff member really worked with HubSpot. We're working with a marketing firm who knows HubSpot. So that's why it's okay for us. Doing it from scratch, like the workflows are pretty complicated. Not as simple as I thought they would be, because there's just so many other exclusions and this and that. And their language is a little bit different. So you kind of have to get used to their languages. But in terms of what staff does, shooting off a one-off email or, that kind of stuff is pretty simple to work with. And we're not using it as a CRM. We have that was going
to be my next question. Have you moved your website into there, or using it as a CRM, or you're mostly just using it as a marketing automation tool?
Marketing automation, and we do have some web pages, not our website, but a few pages. And we want to do some more. And we were talking to our marketing firm, and hey, and we were thinking of a couple new workflows for some expired members, and there was another group of non-members we wanted to target. And they came, instead of a couple of new workflows, they came back with, we think you should move your whole CRM and website over. I'm like, yeah, okay. We just signed a contract for another year on our AMS, and we don't have time to do that right now. That's a big project. So it'll just stay as is for now.
Yeah, when I was doing some work with the Electronic Retailing Association a while ago, we actually used a consulting firm too, a marketing firm, because it was just so complicated. But that we actually used HubSpot as really the marketing database and the marketing platform, but we had an AMS too. Yeah. So it wasn't totally redundant, but it was a little bit redundant, because you're doing your marketing out of one platform, and you're doing your AMS stuff and a lot of your transaction tracking from another, and then they have to talk to each other. So getting that stuff set up, it can get complicated.
And our AMS does not talk well with it. So there's some manual work that the marketing firm is doing. And there's still some manual work, like I have to go in and check for duplicate records, and I've got to go clean out, unengaged records. And it's quick, but so there's some redundancy. And I mean, the API just didn't work. So we call it our pseudo integration. So it's working better than I thought now.
That's good.
Yeah, could be better, but pretty good, working pretty well.
Right. Well, it looks like we got a small group today. Everybody's actually working the day after the pseudo holiday yesterday.
I've never had Columbus Day off, and my daughter walked in and said, she's been looking for the mail all day. I'm like, I haven't seen it because I'm normally working at home, but I'm in the office today. But Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm at home, and usually I see the mail truck go by. And she goes, is Indigenous Peoples a federal holiday? I'm like, what's Indigenous Peoples Day? I'm like, it's called that. She said Columbus Day. I'm like, oh, didn't know it was called that. So yes, Columbus Day is a federal holiday. I don't know. Have they changed the name? Officially changed the name? Okay.
It's a 50-50 name, I think, and it maybe depends on age. I haven't figured that one out yet because I think if you polled the four of us on this call, we'd call it Columbus Day.
Do you feel better?
Maybe other people call it Indigenous Peoples Day. I don't know. I'm now using Columbus/Indigenous Peoples Day because I don't know what it is, and I found that as people I was supposed to be out of the office all day yesterday. But that didn't completely happen. So I was around, as Kevin knows, because we communicated like over work stuff. But I had people sending me meeting appointments and things. And part of the reason I wasn't going to work is because the kids here in our area didn't have school yesterday. Mm-hmm. But I know lots of other places, they had school yesterday. So it was just, it's one of those where it's a holiday, but it's not really a holiday. So you got to just decide what you're going to do. But yes, it is now officially Indigenous Peoples Day.
Okay. I do feel very old. My kids are out of high school, so I have no idea, and especially with virtual, I have no idea if they used to go to school Columbus Day because they would do their open houses. So a lot of parents, obviously in the DC area, are federal workers, and they would have off so they could go to open houses at the school. I don't pay any attention to that calendar anymore.
Pretty sure all of the surrounding DC areas have just changed all of their virtual schooling as well. So it's,
yeah.
So we're staying in it. I mean, we had always planned to, but they have reshifted everything for all of the 3 major counties in and around Northern Virginia. And so now it's staggered start, basically starting with the youngest children to the oldest. So, yeah. But Scott, going back to what you were saying, which I would love to hear from, because I know we've had other people kind of ask that question too, is budgets and moving forward to next year. And has anybody revised theirs? Have you redone it? What are you seeing these days within, your organizations, or Scott, even those that you're working with, heading into, 2021?
Our fiscal year started in July, so we had already had our budget done. And then we have a contingency budget. With, I think, dropping any extras, any extra maybe mailings we planned on doing or whatever. Really planning for dues revenue and renewals to go down. I don't recall what they planned for our conference, which is next week, dollar-wise. So they do have a contingency budget. So.
I'll speak up. Ours is a little bit different. So we run in a calendar year, fiscal year, but we started renewals earlier this month. Pretty typical, 3 months out, but that's also because most of our members, because we're organization based, are doing their budgets for next year right now too. So we're a little different, and because of that, we've kind of weathered this a lot better than I think a lot of other associations have. We are almost entirely dues revenue based. Our conferences, even our big conferences, are budgeted for a loss. So we've actually, quote unquote, saved money this year by going all virtual. So it's been very different than what I'm hearing from a lot of other associations. Obviously, I'm concerned about what 2021 looks like as far as our budget goes, because we are so dues heavy with our income. But that being said, I've actually gotten a lot of positive response from our first round of renewal notices. We've already gotten a commitment from over a third of our members that they are renewing for next year at the full rate. We did do something a little different that our association has never done, but that I'm very excited about with renewals. So we are offering that if they pay by March 31st, that for 2021, then they're getting a comp registration to our legislative conference next November. So I think that is driving some of the response that we're getting. But yeah, it's been very different for us. So our budget really hasn't changed. We're in the process of creating it for 2021 right now, but our numbers are very close to what they were last year.
You know, it's
Great.
interesting, Lee. I was just thinking, listening to you there, that, you know, again, silver linings from all of this is that, you know, we're tempted to make offers that we just never would have made before. It's, you know, we have the same competition we did last year and that we'll have next year, but, you know, we just are willing to cut a deal and to be somewhat more audience responsive. And, you know, especially in membership when we're so, oh, we'd never give a discount, or we might not offer a premium. Suddenly we are, because you don't want to face the, you know, the opportunity cost of skipping this time.
Yeah.
And, you know, sort of leaving lots of other money on the table because maybe we were kind of too cheap to
Right.
do some kind of offer. Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
good.
And my board actually put together a task force that looked at dues for next year and what we could potentially do. So I actually, so we offered the, you know, pay by March 31st. You get a comp registration to our legislative conference, to everyone, to all renewals, but they actually they set me a goal of not losing any members due to COVID restrictions. So I then also have 5 other offers that I can put in my back pocket for negotiations that have been approved by my board. And so we'll see. I'm excited to see how this goes, and see what comes up next year.
Okay. Now, just one more question. Are you, is the choice of this legislative conference, is that because you feel like it's off far enough for it to have a good chance of being non-virtual and therefore a little more traditional? Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. We have we do a professional development conference in the spring, and then our legislative conference every fall, and in November, right before Thanksgiving. So we're still a little iffy about May for our professional development conference, unfortunately, but we're much more optimistic about a year from now. So.
Well, you know, it's interesting because I don't follow meeting planning probably like I should, as sort of a corollary to what we do here with membership. But, you know, I get the feeling that we still just don't know. I mean, I live in Vegas. And so, of course, all the local news is like, you know, what can we do to bring the conventions back? Like we lost our big rodeo, which, of course, sounds kind of trite, but it brings in 170,000 people this time of year. And so when we sort of look at these other events, there's a lot of money riding on it. And yet they're all sitting there going, we have no idea when we as a state, when our governor will go ahead and open that up to where people can even start to plan to have a convention. And that's why, you know, Scott, from my standpoint too, I just kind of look like, well, how can you really forecast a budget accurately if you're not like in Lee's circumstances, and, you know, the net return that you're getting off, say, your major trade show and or your conference or convention is still up in the air. It could be one format that's going to be low revenue, maybe still a decent margin, but, you know, low revenue, low cost, or it could be the high revenue, high cost. And I think a lot of times when we don't hear people talking definitively about this, it's just that uncertainty about when are we going to be able to, you know, sort of reopen the traditional, you know, convention industry again.
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, we could talk about this forever. Flip a coin, right? Pick a month and flip a coin, because there's no way to know. I mean, I think I mentioned on our last call, I had a client that said to me, hey, what are you seeing? You know, we typically do our conference face-to-face in August. What are you seeing? And I said, I don't know. You know, what I'm seeing is people don't know. And so my recommendation to her is because you don't know, take away the uncertainty, and instead of planning for, because there are like 3 staff. So instead of planning for a virtual, a hybrid, and a face-to-face, which is 3 times the work, pick one. And my recommendation is pick virtual and make it an unbelievable virtual experience. Don't worry about anything else. But there's no way. I mean, if you look at Collaborate and everything else, people are like, yeah, we're starting to do it. Yeah, we're thinking about doing it. Yeah, we have no idea when we're going to do it. Right. And so there's no way to know. There's just no way to know. And I think the bigger question mark is, will people go? You know, will your attendees show up? I think the exhibitors and the sponsors are going to be more likely to show up because they have revenue on it, right? They can't, in some ways, they can't not go. So they're willing to be a little bit more risky than your attendees. Your attendees are the big question is, do they want to? And then does it make sense to put the money into having it face-to-face where maybe 50% of what you usually get will show up? You don't know, because I think that is still the biggest question mark. And whether you listen to the debates or not, we're getting a vaccine tomorrow, or we're getting a vaccine in 10 years.
But no one's going to take it. No one's going to get it.
Exactly. So, you got, in my opinion, the Scott Oster medical opinion, you got to be a little bit crazy to even think about going to a face-to-face event unless it's small within the next 6 months. You're just putting too much at risk. And you're probably not, if you want to take the risk aside, you're probably also not going to get the return that you want, because maybe you won't get the same speakers you have in the past. You're probably not going to get the same networking opportunities as you have in the past, because not that many people are going to show. So I don't know. I think next year is going to be kind of shot for in person, but I know groups are going to do it.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think that's a good thing. I don't think our group has decided. And I do know, I saw something about marketing and it had next year's dates on it. It's late October.
Yep.
Day before Halloween it ends. Dang it. Anyways, and it's supposed to be in Chicago. So there was something going out and I'm like, hey, I noticed it didn't say Chicago. Is that because we're not sure? And my boss is like, yeah, we don't know yet. So we're not saying it.
Yeah, I was just going to follow up kind of.
Because halfway through has been a nightmare for everybody. Like the time I'm spending on conference, and not getting to other things and switching everything. So you're right, they probably just should pick. And our people love face-to-face, and I love seeing everybody, once a year. But if they're not going to show, maybe we should just pick the safer. Pick the safer one and go virtual. And hopefully, I feel like it shouldn't cost nearly as much as what we're supposedly spending right now on our virtual conference.
Yeah, I hear you. I think, so I will say, sometimes working for a small staff standalone is good because we can be really nimble in how we're responding to everything going on, and basically a week by week change at this point. So we just, in September, about a month ago, decided to cancel our in-person November conference, obviously. But what we're doing instead is, so that conference is really about, for our members, is about relationship building with legislative leaders. And so we knew that going to like a traditional virtual conference format was not going to work. Like that was not going to give us the same experience that we wanted. So instead what we're doing is basically a webinar series with legislative leaders from all across the US and the territories, where we're doing 52 weeks of, so one every week, and starting in January. And each legislative leader is kind of running a more of a general interest town hall webinar where they share something that they're passionate about. So for example, the Kentucky speaker is doing a bourbon tasting for us. And so it's really more about the social aspect. And we kind of like picked apart our conference and said, okay, this is really what people are there for, is that social and that low-key relationship building networking. So how can we replicate that in a virtual environment, but still have it be interesting? So that's what we're doing. And I apologize, it doesn't start in January. We're starting it the same week that we would normally have that conference this year. So it will be like a lead up to next year's conference.
You know, Scott, one thing that you had mentioned that occurs to me here, and in Lee's case where you have the small staff too, and perhaps Sharon as well, is that, you know, we're also talking about 3, 4, 10 staff organizations. And I keep thinking about how do you really develop that core competency? Because I've seen these sort of like rapidly emerging gurus on how to make your virtual conference the most compelling ever, you know, and sort of like, as we know, there's never any shortage of ideas in the association community. There is a shortage of the ability to successfully implement, you know, and so I always catch myself thinking, how the the hell does like a 3-person staff, client of Scott's like suddenly say, okay, you're going to spend a quarter of your time developing this. Now we don't know. It might go in person next year, so you might be wasting all your time developing the skill set. But I'm always sort of in awe of like what small staff organizations have to do, and now what they're being forced to do. Yeah. So.
You gonna say hello, Dan, or are you gonna be incognito?
I'm here.
You could be me this time.
Better late than never, I guess, at this point. But yeah, thanks for keeping things going. We had a budget meeting that went over, and you don't want to miss those. Those were
so how is your budget? Yeah.
Our budget is really very weird. I mean, it's as weird as the year has been. It's like, what do we do? And, how do you budget for the meeting side of things? And for our industry, the increase in budget is probably something I'm very uncomfortable with at this point, because, when most organizations are seeing a 2 to 3% increase year after year, this time we're looking at like 3 times that with our what we're promising, because of the food industry being so flush with sales and revenue and income on their side. So it's kind of scary on my part, where it's like, okay, we're promising this and we're gonna have to come through. So but it's all based on the industry. With the trade associations, you base it on sales and budget and things like that. So it's.
Are you, Dan? Are you mostly mostly U.S. based and some international, or how are you?
It's a very small international contingent of our membership. Some Canadian, a good amount of Canadian, about the same amount as Canadian as we have total international outside of U.S. and Canada. But then the U.S. is big majority of our membership, obviously. But Kevin, the statement you made just earlier, is you should write that down and put it out there as an article or a headline. Just that the number of ideas that the association world has, and if they don't have the capacity to actually implement most of those ideas. I see that so many. Every year of my career, I've seen that same thing happen, where if it's not the staff coming up with it, it's the board, and then you have to try to figure out, well, if the board came up with it, that means we might actually have to do it. If the staff came up with it, it's like, well, that's our choice, isn't it? Whether we actually take that on. So.
Yeah. Well, Dan, you weren't around for this part of the call, but Sharon was mentioning earlier how they're using HubSpot to do a bunch of marketing automation and that kind of stuff. And I asked her, I said, "Are you guys doing that?" And her answer was, "We've got a marketing firm that's helping us do that." And I think that's one of the biggest challenges, or I shouldn't even say that, it's one of the many challenges that associations face, right? Is that there's so much great technology out there that we could potentially use, but I mean, let's talk about, for example, either HubSpot or like a retargeting campaign, right? Mm-hmm. I know people should be doing retargeting. I can't do retargeting. I could learn how to do retargeting, but if I was one of 3 people on staff, the last thing I have time for is to learn how to develop and implement a retargeting campaign. Right? So, it's like, how do we, in our budgets, back to budgeting again, how do we have a small little piece of something that says, we know this is a good idea and we know we want to do it, but we know we can't do it internally. So we've got to pay someone to do it.
That's right. And that's working smarter than harder. And to me, it's like you get someone to set it up and automate what you want to automate. And then it's just about whether you still have the ability or the capacity to actually maintain it and monitor it. I think that's the issue, is that it's like any website. I can tell you from our experiences with our websites, it's like, we may have had help putting it all together, but maintaining it, updating it, monitoring it, holy moly, that's a lot of work. So
this is where you hope to God you have good reserves, and you pray to God you have a great board in place that will actually listen to the small staff that's doing all the work,
right, as
opposed to ones that are set in stone and they're like, no, it'll be fine. We'll just figure it out later. We'll just let it roll by. We don't need to do that. Yeah. I mean, that's the hardest part, I think, especially for small staffs. And then like Lee, talking with you, when you are dealing with a board that's been in place, I mean, when I was an ED, my board was every single past president since the organization started. And I kid you not, we had arguments over letterhead because inevitably we were running out of space because all of their names had to be on the bottom of letterhead.
Oh my
Like,
God.
so, I think that's where it comes down, where it matters so much, because those were things I dealt with every day, was fighting to be able to pay somebody to do the work instead of Scott, like you're saying. I could figure it out. I don't want to figure it out. I didn't go into IT because I don't like IT. Like,
Great.
but yeah, you gotta find the money somewhere.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that. It's you guys are like speaking to my communications. So there's a staff of 5. We're a staff of 5, including our executive director, and our board leadership changes every year. But the organization's been around for 45 years. Our executive director has been executive director for 20 years. So it can be, you always run up against that in, I feel like, every association, something like that. But really what our communications director and I have been working on is creating a retargeting campaign and a drip campaign for new members as well, because this is something that they've never done before. And she and I both are like, okay, we've actually just ended up setting time aside on our calendars every week to work on it, not only together for an hour, but then, other time, just to make sure that it doesn't get bumped for other things that, other ideas that come up.
Good for you.
So it's been a bit of a time management issue for sure, resource management as well, because we're both dipping into our budgets, our committee budgets, to make these things happen. But yeah, I haven't had that conversation about bringing an outside team in, and unfortunately, I don't think that's going to be viable for us. So I am we have to figure it out.
Sometimes it takes so much longer too to do the education of it, because you have to be able to educate the board, who's really making those decisions, in that small staff, on why it's so vital and important to be using a different outside company that's way better at it. I mean, I fought for years to get membership help. I didn't know Dan, so it didn't. I mean, I did, but I didn't use them for that. And I should have.
No, she used me in other ways.
La 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 la.
Yeah, look where I am.
Right, exactly.
Our board is really great. I mean, they're not that involved with that type of thing. They really keep it strategic and higher level. And if we go to them and say, like, this is why we need a marketing automation system, here's what's going to do, and blah, blah, they're just like, great. I mean, but then there's still 6 of us that have to do it all. So that is not a struggle for us. We have committees. We're 80 years old. So we have committees that were set up probably 75 years ago that we can't really change, and that's a big challenge, but it is what it is. But the board is great. Our trying to learn all this new stuff is like, our deputy director, we just couldn't do it without her. She's like, all right, I gotta go learn about marketing automation systems. And she goes and she learns it. And one of the challenges with using someone outside, though, is then we had to educate them about our industry. And we're not a cool, hip association, and you can't be like, hey, dude, in your email to this profession, and particularly their writers. So I was terrified to send an email the first 3 months I worked here to anybody, because they'll just be like, you forgot a comma. Like, that's all they'll see, So we spent a lot of time educating our marketing firm that we're working with, but they were great to work with. And we're willing, and we're like, yeah, no, you can't say that. No, you can't promise you're going to increase their business. You can't, so, because I don't think they worked with a ton of associations. So it's just like right now, our executive director is always like, because we're down a couple staff, we have been for a year now, and our executive, well, we need temporary help, we'll get temporary help. And we're like, time to get them in and train them, like I could have just done it myself, and it's, we kind of got to get out of that mindset a little bit, but it's definitely a challenge with small staff.
Yeah.
Wear a lot of hats.
It's hard to be good at delegating when there's nowhere to delegate, but
Well,
you know, that's it.
And oftentimes it's hard to then delegate when you're doing it all yourself and you think you can do it well and you know how to do it and everything else. And so it goes, you know, it goes both ways.
You gotta let go. Yeah. And it's hard. And in my group here, it's very hard to let go. And it's like, I worked at a small staff association. We had like 13 or 15, there's some ridiculous number of committees, but those committees got work done. They did a lot. And I'm like, we try to control our committees and basically do the work and have them basically bless it. I'm like, if we're gonna start a committee, let them do it. If you're gonna do it, don't have a committee, you know? So it's hard to let go, but you know, I think it's just been so, I think they had some experiences here with some committees are obviously volunteers, and they did a salary survey years ago, and the committee, you know, they're volunteering and they got way behind schedule because they're volunteers. Whereas so the last time we did one or 2 years ago, we hired a firm. So that makes sense, you know, for such a big project.
Sharon, you're speaking my language right now.
I mean, it's like I work with the chapter leaders in an advisory council, and I basically do the entire agenda and give it to them and go, how does this? And they're like, great. I'm like, okay, well, I need you, but okay, you know, but yes, but we got to let go. We won't let go. So
yeah, I actually literally just about an hour and a half ago had a call with my incoming chair for my Young Professionals Committee, which is a committee that just started on this organization last year. And that was part of the conversation was, okay, I need to get better at delegating to you guys. And I need you to help me with that, because there have been things that we wanted to do this year that the way that my organization has worked in the past is, okay, staff just does everything and the committees are there to kind of rubber stamp, basically. And I'm like, that's not how it should be. And quite frankly, I don't have time for that. So, you know, I need to get better at that and get better at delegating and helping find ways for everyone to contribute and not just automatically assume that I'm going to take it on as the staff liaison. And it was a really liberating conversation, I have to admit. So, and I just had one a couple weeks ago, same conversation with my new membership leadership. So I hear you, and it's so hard to do, especially when that's just how it's been within the organization, let alone your own personality. You know, so I hear everything you're saying right now.
We had a new committee. This was like a couple years ago, and it was chapter support, and they had to redo this ridiculous 45-page PDF. And I kind of knew in my head how I wanted it set up, and I just presented the technical capabilities that we had here, and we could do this, and I set up a couple sample web pages for them, and we could do this. And it was also a really good group of people, a good group of workers, and they, you know, and I was in on all the meetings and calls, and I just kind of piped in if like, you know, we can't do that or whatever, you know, because sometimes I think it's magic. And it was great. And we just set deadlines and we were done ahead of time. It was really more of a task force when you look back on it. I mean, we were done, and it was a very clear charge. That made it easier. Here's your goal. You have to have this new resources for the chapters. And it was done, and it was great. And, you know, but at one point, like my executive director was like, just tell them you're going to do that. I'm like, they're going to get there on their own. Trust me. Let them come to that conclusion. You know, instead of just tell them. I'm like, what? Then why are they here if I'm just going to tell them? You know. So that one worked out well. When we really did let people do the work, it worked much better. It was very productive, you know, group, and they got their task done, and that was basically the end of that committee. It was really, like I said, looking back at task force. So, but and then it's also harder, like when you're down staff or you're busy, and that whole same thing. You're just like, oh, you know, so it's I'm ready to delegate. Delegate too. So I'm ready to delegate other people's jobs back to them. But right now, we're just going to do what we got to do.
You know, Scott, I think we should be calling this more of a support group
I know.
rather than, you know,
Therapy.
Lee's made some great progress on her therapy, I think.
Sorry.
No, I'm kidding. You know, and delegating and handing off, you know, that's really amazing. Really, I could tell you, and just I know Nicole's lived it a lot more than I have because most of the places I've been have larger staff, but it's so difficult, and especially when, you know, it was really difficult when I was in charge of committees and groups to delegate to them, thinking that they were volunteers, you know, and it's almost like, you know, are they going to look at me and say, well, no, that's why we're paying you, you know? It's tough, but it has to happen. It just has to happen.
And it's also a catch-22 on another way, which is even when you delegate, it doesn't mean that it's going to be done the way that you want it or following guidelines or whatever it might be. So, you know, in some ways you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, because you want to give it to other people, but then if they sort of ignore whatever they want to ignore, you get it back, and then you feel bad because you go, no, you should have done this and you should have changed it that way and you should have blah, blah, blah. And then they're like, why are you asking me to do it if you're just going to correct everything that I do? That doesn't really work very well. So either do it or let me do it to the best that I can, and you got to deal with it. And as the staff person, it's hard to deal with it if it's not really done what we would define as well.
Yeah. I think that's really going to be part of my leadership challenge personally for the next year is, okay, how do I find that middle ground where I'm providing enough guidance so that, you know, they do follow whatever procedures we need to follow and things like that, but allow them enough leeway to be able to say, hey, like, this is what we think the industry needs right now and what we think our members are really going to respond to. So
yeah, I'm working on something right now where a group came to me and said, look, we've really got 5 divisions and we need to be able to promote membership. It's all going to be, we're going to basically hand these things off. They're not going to do it in person now, but we're basically going to be handing these things off. It's going to be one-to-one. And so after, I don't know, 3 months of conversations, I came up with a template and I said, okay, here's what you guys got to do. And here's the kind of stuff to stick in here. It's just sitting and sitting. I tried to make it so that at least they would have some consistency across the organization, and all they got to do is plop stuff in. The stuff that they want to highlight, it's laid out, put this here, put this here. And the executive director is trying to make it happen. And I ping him like once every couple of weeks or so. And anybody who's ever worked as a consultant understands this. 50% of it is no longer in my brain. I don't even know because it's been so long, right? And so I ping him like every couple of weeks because he knows it needs to get done and I don't want to drive him too crazy. And I get these emails back like a week after I send him the email going, yeah, still herding cats over here. And I'm like, all right, dude, whenever you get to it, get to it. And the last time I emailed him, I was honest with him and I said, look, it's been so long since we started this. A lot of it, the knowledge that I had is gone and I apologize for that, but I can't, you know, I'm not going to refresh myself every week hoping that this stuff comes in because we've got other things to do, just like you would as staff, right? It's the same thing. You got to move on at some point. And so I tried to make it as simple as I could, and we'll see what we get back.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of moving on, how's that sort of segue? I think we're going to have to wrap it up, even though it's only been like, I don't know, 15 minutes for me. So, but I really appreciate everyone being here this week, and I hope everything went well in the first part of it. I'll get an update soon. But have a great week, and really appreciate this. And this will all be up on the website again if you need to review anything. But thanks for everyone attending, and we'll see you next time, which is on the 27th, 2 weeks from today, 12:30, same channel, and we'll send out more information on that. So have a great week. Enjoy,
Everybody.
you know,
Bye, everyone. Have a good
Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
everybody.